Folks, welcome to a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. The cross-fertilization of music in regional areas of this country was prevalent with wide-ranging accessible AM radio, the ability for musicians to travel and be mobile, and a general sense that everybody was digging what others were up to. This was not just in relation to the music itself, but an actual indigenous building of art sculptures that were turned into instruments, specifically percussive instruments. One regional hotbed of activity was the San Francisco Bay Area. This was where the Gravity Adjusters expansion band came to fruition. My guest was an integral part of this band. He had been making art sculptures for quite some time, but on the unrelenting advice of fellow Mississippian Lee Charlton, my guest started using these sculptures as percussive instruments in the Gravity Adjusters expansion band. This led to his creation, the waterphone, and many other wind, string, and percussion instruments which utilized water in their resonators to bend tones and set these schizophonic sounds. Fusing artistic mediums, Richard Waters, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you.
So can you talk a little bit about your musical aptitude? I think you're kind of humble, but talk about your musical upbringing in Mississippi.
Well, my parents were in the hotel business, so we traveled quite a bit, mostly in Florida, but we ended up in Mississippi. But my mother thought it would be a great idea if I took piano lessons at age 7, I think it was. And that lasted about maybe 2 months because they wanted me to play in a recital. I ran away from home. So that didn't go over too good, and then my mother said she wasn't going to press that anymore. So I really did not know that I was even vaguely interested in going into music. But my mother was a patron of the arts, and I was exposed to a lot of artists as I was growing up, and it just seemed like something that was a lot more interesting than a traditional business situation, which I did not want to get into.
Right, and so, I mean, art is it's all relative, you know, and to me it was just as I've been on this mission for over 2 years, and, you know, I've gone through different bands, different amalgamations of bands, and have gotten into different pockets of time, and, you know, I've been talking to Lee for quite some time, but I really was somewhat floored by this band that came about. But the idea is that, I mean, taking sculptures and turning them into instruments is just one of the most abstract and outside the box things that I've ever come across. And so talk a little bit about if it was something that had to grow on you for a while. I mean, did you think it was just sort of an outlandish thing? You just were into working with your hands, or was it really the case where over time it started to make more sense?
Well, probably the latter, but I never. For me, it was always playing music was a question of fun. Because at that point in time, I had a master's degree in fine arts and painting, and was making my living selling paintings. So doing the music thing was kind of a part-time on the side with Lee in his studio in Fairfax, and it evolved in that environment into something that we didn't quite realize, because when you think about free music, a lot of instruments that are designed today are so conventional, it's hard for some of them to even be used in free music, whereas instruments that have no name and all they do is make sound puts the music into a different situation. It's just not. It's not like improvising jazz, though that is relative. And I was, I guess, really intrigued by the fact that a group of us could come together, and as we would start playing, all of a sudden it would click into a piece of music that nobody knew how it got there nor where it was going, but away we went. And that was a very enlightening activity for me.
Going back for a minute, yeah, I mean, your mom was a patron of the arts, but you were good. Like you had good fine motor skills. You were always building a lot of stuff when you were growing up.
Not a lot of stuff. Some things. I had a grandfather that was extremely facile with his hands. He could make stuff very easily with really not much in the way of tools, and he showed me some of that stuff, and then I started making little things, turkey bone whistles and palmetto crow calls and just little sound devices. Never, ever even thinking that I was going to get involved in music. And then I ran a water ski school on the coast here in Mississippi, and we had a ski shed where we could change clothes, but we also played jungle music in there at night. So we had drums and the maracas and all the stuff. So it kind of slowly crept up on me. When I met Lee, I guess I must have been primed because it was about that time that he was playing in Biloxi in a jazz band, and I was finishing up with college in Hattiesburg, and we both exited almost at the same time for California and resumed our friendship and carried it on into the music field. And I just played with him not too long ago, about a month and a half ago, out in Petaluma at the Cinnabar Theater.
So you guys so the Gravity Adjusters band, I know Donlinger has left us now, but was it just a two-man group? Who else did you play with?
Well, we had a lot of floating players, but one of the main ones that you did not mention is Chuck Day, and it was Lee and Tom and Chuck and I that were the nucleus of the Gravity Adjusters, but we often invited other people to sit in or play with us or record with us, so it just depends on the situation. There was a lot of different performances in different places, and we sounded, even though we sounded the same, we sounded different.
So this recent gig in Petaluma, Chuck Day was on the gig as well?
No, unfortunately, Chuck has joined Tom Donlinger, or wherever that is. And,
yeah, right. They're with the Spirits, yeah.
And I really.
So basically, did you know? I mean, Lee's story was that him and Ellis Marsalis jumped in a van and got out to the Bay Area. But did you come out there for different reasons? Did you know Lee was out there, or did you just bump into him one day?
It just was a coincidence that we both moved out about the same time. The band had gotten an offer from a club owner in Oakland that I didn't even know about, and I had been actually living out in Inverness and been painting out for almost a year, I think, when they actually moved out. But it was, and then they got in touch, and we started hanging out, and, all of that.
Yeah, it's the all of that part that I'm really interested in. Actually, I just find it amazing that you guys were able to come together and, like you said, start some kind of theme or just start some momentum, percussive momentum, and then eventually that would build into an actual song. This album that Lee sent me really is it seems to cover a lot of different continents. I mean, I hear Asian music in there, and within that I hear Chinese or Tibetan music, and maybe there's Middle Eastern percussion rhythms, and there's polyrhythms from India, and there's classical European. I mean, I don't know if that was. Did you guys I know occasionally, like, the, they're a band that comes to mind is like the Grateful Dead, where they would have a drums and space segment, and sometimes they would say, "Oh, we're gonna do like a Richard Nixon in China theme," and they'd kind of. Did you guys have themes for the songs, or did it just develop? I mean, would you say let's do something with an Asian tinge, or would it just sort of be completely organic?
No, it was completely organic, and only on rare occasion did we even suggest what direction it might go in. Like, okay, let's do a drone, or let's do an up-tempo thing. But usually we just, hey, let's play and see where it goes. And there gets to be a point, and it usually happens where everybody's listening, and all of a sudden a sound, a certain bunch of sounds, kind of click the whole thing in, and it really is a piece of music. However, when you mentioned song, that is something we didn't quite do because there was nothing. We played so organically that there was no way possible that we were able to do the same thing again the same way.
Right. But, I mean, unless you were, but I know Lee was a voracious taper. So maybe you taped something. You could, I guess, go back and theoretically listen, but I'm sure you didn't want to do that anyway. You don't want to listen to that stuff. You just want to keep it fresh.
Well, he's got thousands of hours of tape, and I have no all of those. Some of them are extremely interesting. Back in the days when we first started playing, a lot of people were coming through the Bay Area, Nigerian harp players, and just all kinds of people that would come sit in, and he's got tapes of all of that. So, but again, I don't know what's going to happen. In fact, when you really think about it, think about all the musicians, and a lot of them are really good musicians that have been recording their stuff for years and years and have all this great music stacked back somewhere. What is going to happen to all of that?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, I've talked to a couple of a Bay Area drummer, Vince Ladiano. Lee's another one. Ozzy Allers, the keyboardist, is another one. A lot of these guys are sitting on these bands that might have only been in existence for like a couple of years, or maybe they made a couple of albums, and they have all this stuff on analog cassette that I work with an engineer down here. He's got serious chops, and we're jonesing to get our hands. But you're right. I mean, there is so much unreleased stuff that, and I think that the quandary for a lot of artists is like, how do I get my fair share for this stuff? Because is there a market for it in this?
I agree, and I think that if some sort of a collective situation isn't arrived at, an organization, probably nonprofit, that would actually act as a storehouse for all this material, then all that material is going to be lost. It's going to get ruined or given up or thrown in the trash or whatever. So
it will not be thrown in the trash. I mean, that's the thing, is that I know that if I am persistent enough with some of these cats, at least I can get my hands on. I mean, like you said, I don't know how much were you somewhat of. Were you actively? I mean, it's funny because you came into music sort of through a side door, but were you actively checking out, like, were you going and checking out a lot of jazz, or were you going to like a lot of? Because I mean, San Francisco had go ahead.
I've been listening to jazz for I don't know, at least 10 years by then. By the time this all started getting together, and Lee was aware of my music likes and dislikes, and we were pretty sympathetic on that. So it was really, and I'm still listening as far as that goes. At a much wider range, I might also say, of the world music is a lot more interesting to me. But anyhow, neither Lee nor I, when we started playing this stuff, thought of any direction or anything. There wasn't any of that. It was just all, let's play some music. And it was after we played for a while that we even decided that we wanted to form a band and to go forward and do recording and performances and stuff like that. And but that was well on into well after we had formed
the Gravity Adjusters expansion band. You know, it's why do you think, in your mind, what is the let me see how I can put this. What are the benefits to completely unstructured, improvisational free music as opposed to? Is there can you strike the right balance between that and sort of this rigid structure? Because I find that especially, my generation. I was born in 1978. And I know.
You're a young whipper.
Young whipper, and but very interested and very much believing in a lot of younger musicians, but I find that a lot of them are caught up in really needing a lot of structure and a lot of space, a lot of perfection, and I don't know where that came from, but I just wanted you. I thought it'd be perfect for somebody like yourself to just talk about how you would go into these sessions and there wasn't necessarily people were hanging up their hang-ups. They weren't getting all uptight about, we got to do it like this or this, or it has to sound, get all this straight. It was just, let's hit it and see where it goes. Can you talk about that freedom and how it made you feel more secure to express yourself musically?
Well, one of the things that this kind of music that we're playing, and some people call it new music, some people call it free music, or whatever name they have for it. But it is a fact that when it comes together as you're playing it, it is extremely exhilarating, or at least it was for me, and I think it is for other people too, because you can hear a change in the music whereby every note, every sound is being struck just at the right time, and everything is coming together in a really interesting kind of way. So for me, that act of several, more than one person, usually 3, 4, 5, being able to do that on a non-structured level, I can't tell you why that's so exciting, but it is.
It's funny. I'm not sure. I'm reading here. It says some musicians already exposed to these original instruments: Roger Kellaway, Shelly Manne, Dave Grusin, and the Grateful Dead. Were these some of the guys that frequented your jam sessions, or how did you know that they were already exposed to these original instruments?
Well, Shelly Manne. Lee Charlton and Shelly Manne were friends. Mm-hmm. And after I'd invented the waterphone, Lee called Shelly up and told Shelly that he ought to come up and take a look at this instrument, but there might be something he could use in the soundtracks, which he was working on in Hollywood. And he did. And he bought several, and then that kind of opened the door to Hollywood because Emil Richards came up and some other people, and that kind of kick-started my business right there, and that's mainly, and then at one point, Emil Richards said, hey, man, come on down with all your instruments, I'll hook you up with everybody, which I did, and he did, and I made more money in that one load of instruments to Los Angeles than I'd made in the entire previous year with painting and a little bit of sculpture I was selling. So
that is absolutely one of the most classic stories of all. I mean, Emil was one of my first guests, and I went out to visit him, and I mean, that guy, that trip he took via the State Department where he collected all those instruments in the Middle East and brought back all those percussive instruments, and the idea that this waterphone really just had such a massive impact on, not going in all different directions here, but Shelly Manne made an album around this time, 72, 73, called Mankind. And he had a percussionist on that album called Brian Moffat. And they used the waterphone on that. It's one of my it's probably my favorite Shelly Manne album because they use at least 24 percussive instruments.
Right.
I mean, and then also on top of that, you tapped into Hollywood. Who else came in from? Who else really got a? You brought all this stuff down in a van. You would just bring strictly waterphones, or were you bringing other stuff as well?
I brought everything. I brought stringed instruments. I brought horns. I brought percussion stuff. I brought a lot of waterphones. I filled up the van.
So then you,
and it was
right.
real interesting scene for me because I met a lot of interesting people with Emil, and he took me around to the recording studios as he was working on these soundtracks, and that was kind of interesting. So it was nice. It was kind of an eye opener for me, and changed my direction in terms of my occupation because at that point I was no longer a painter; I was an instrument builder, and that and it's funny how that kind of stuff goes, because you sell one waterphone and you don't know how many people are going to see it here. It could be 500, it could be 10,000. But eventually it acts as a super duper, very sophisticated business card and relates people back into me in terms of anybody that wants to buy a future waterphone. So
let me be clear here. You patented that instrument. I mean, that is your you created that.
Yes.
So anyone that wants to, so you explain, because I do not have really a business acumen, but the idea of a patent there is that you're the sole proprietor, meaning anybody. I mean, do you sell wholesale? Do waterphones go wholesale, or is it just through private orders?
No.
How does it work?
I have sold wholesale, but the thing about a patent, it's only good for 20 years. And when you go to all the trouble of getting a patent, and it is a lot of trouble, believe me, I don't even want to get into that. But when you go to all that trouble and expense of getting a patent, the only thing you then have is the right to sue someone who is copying your designs, and that can get very expensive. And I have had problems with that. But at this point, my patent has expired, so I've got maybe around the world in about as many countries. I've got 7 different people doing knockoffs, and at this point, there's not a decent one in the bunch, but who knows what's coming down the pike? And there are some good metal workers working on it, but they're not there yet. So
they're not there yet. They're not there. I mean, are people reaching out to you and trying to get advice from you? How do you know they're not there yet?
Because I hear their instruments and see them, and I know what's what.
This is one of the greatest interviews. I mean, out of the 300 plus that I've done, from Bill Cosby to Emil to Melvin Van Peebles. I mean, this is unbelievable to talk to Richard Waters. Talk a little bit about some of those world musicians. Who did Emil introduce you to down there?
Well, Lalo Schifrin for one. But once I set my business up, for a while I was dealing through stores, but in order to do the wholesale, and I was working twice as hard for half as much money, so I thought this is ridiculous, and I was barely staying afloat. And I'm barely staying afloat now. I'm not getting wealthy making waterphones, even though the price is on up there from what they used to be 30 years ago, of course. But I'm making a better instrument, and I'm trying to make them better all the time. And that's the nature of my relationship with musical instruments. I don't just make them and say, hey, wow, that's cool. Each time I make one, I want it to be a little bit better than the last one I made. So that's what I work towards. And they're I think doing it because they're sounding really good right now.
So, I mean, because at that time, Emil was tapped into transcendental meditation. The Beatles were there. There was a lot of Indian music. Did you, get a chance to, did you get a chance to play this instrument or to give a sampling to world musicians from India or the Middle East or anything like that?
Not really. I think that most of the contact was through people that saw the waterphone or heard it someplace, and they would contact me and try to arrange something. Usually what that ended up being was I'd sell them a $10 cassette that they could apply back towards purchase, and they could listen on there to all the models of the waterphone and everything else I made. And if they didn't want to buy anything, that's okay too. But most of them did, and like I said, the more waterphones I make and sell, the more of them I have out there working in my behalf, because people hear them and they say, "Hey, where'd you get that? I want one of those," and it goes out like that.
I'm curious because, as a layperson, as a journalist, not a musician, could you talk about when you say the water bends the notes? What was it about the waterphone that was so infectious and inviting and so new at that time? What made it stand out?
Well, that was an unusual tonal quality when you hook up water with a tone that's being produced, especially in an instrument that can be percussive, because there's an awful lot of sympathies in all those rods, and of course that bottom band carries a really wide range of sound. So when you start bending tones by shifting the attitude of the waterphone and moving the water around on the bottom, which does modify that sound, it was just really unusual. And you couple that with a tonal rod series that's not tuned to any conventional scale, Hollywood went nuts over that. They didn't have anything like that. That's what made it so, and it still does. It's outside their conventional range of instruments, and it's valued for that quality, and that's why they use it in science fiction and zombie movies, and it came from outer space, all that stuff, is that it's not a conventional sounding instrument.
Yeah, I think it's what's classic is that your invention, you had a patent for 20 years, but science fiction films exploded pretty soon after that. I mean, they were always prevalent, but there was a lot of stuff, Star Wars and E.T. and all this other stuff. I mean, the timing was uncanny, really. I mean, looking back on it, clearly it's like it became a livelihood thing in many ways for you, but how do you account for that, from a spiritual point of view? I mean, like you said, it just came to the point where you're painting, you're making sculptures, Lee's staying on you, telling you to get more serious. Slowly it builds, and then all of a sudden, boom, you get into this thing. Was that an amazingly spiritual thing for you? Did you remain grounded? Looking back on it, what are your feelings about it?
Well, it progressed so slowly that it felt extremely natural, and I had a really strong interest in it, or I wouldn't have kept up with it, because there was a lot of lean years in which money was not coming in, and I was trying to survive on painting, even though I was building a lot of instruments. So I'm really just thankful. The fact that I have invented an instrument that people like, and that I sell enough of them that I can keep on eating and buy gasoline for my cars. I appreciate that. I don't know how else to say it, but I really appreciate it. If I was just trying to, here at Mississippi, if I was trying to make it just on my paintings, I'd have to go on welfare, and food stamps and all of that, and I'd rather not do that.
Well, we've been talking in the abstract about it. Let's take a listen to the Gravity Adjusters Expansion Band, in which Richard Waters was a vital cog. How does that hold up to your ears?
Terrible. I don't even recognize that. It's distorted so weirdly. I don't know what that is.
that was off One, the album One, the extended version of that song. Sounded great. Sounded great to me, but yeah, I mean, not the most ideal audio conditions. But how many, aside from the waterphone, what kinds of things? What were the unique percussive instruments that were brought into to the group?
A lot of water drums, and a fair amount of bamboo percussion instruments, and some pretty irregular horns. Lee plays a thing he calls the trombette. That's kind of a slide horn with, I think it's a tenor mouthpiece on it. That's pretty great. But all kinds of little stuff too, things that we would find, that made sound. And also, the bassist Cloud Flowers actually invented the Super Bowl mallet he wanted something he could rub his bass with, and he came up with that idea, and I've of course since taken it on to new heights with the bamboo Super Bowl mallet. But the Super Bowl mallet, in my way of thinking, is one of the great inventions of the century because you can play any smooth, clean surface. So that means windows, cars, water pumps, drums, whatever. And I don't know, toys. Some toys make some interesting sound. We've had a number of those we've used, usually as little percussion instruments. And some of the other things that I made that we couldn't use, wind harps and wind flutes, stuff like that. They were too obscure in terms of manipulating.
Clyde Flowers is now a private investigator?
Yes, I did hear that, and I haven't seen him or talked to him since way back then. Do you ever see him?
No, but I would love to be able to talk to him about this and the fact that he reinvented himself in such a different capacity. I'm curious. This album in particular, One, was released on Nocturne Records, 1973. How did you get all those instruments down to? Where did the recording happen, in Northern California, or was it in L.A.?
L.A.
So how did you wind up getting all that? Did you just put it in a van and brought it down there?
Yeah, I filled up the van, and Lee took his car and took a bunch of stuff, and I forget who else. Well, I don't know who else hauled things, but we divided it up so that we could get everything we wanted. And we had a couple of large things that we wanted down there, so we worked it out.
In looking at the, you say you listen to a lot of world music today. Could you point my audience in directions of or if there's anything out there at all that is somewhat scintillating to you, something similar to what you guys were, anyone building on what you guys were doing?
Well, I don't know. I just got contacted by Waterphone Project Duo out of Germany. They're looking for gigs, and I listen to some of their music on SoundCloud. Pretty laid back stuff. I don't know. And there's bands out there that are doing some pretty experimental stuff, but most of them are just like we were. That is, it's hard to get gigs and difficult to get recorded and produced, and you have to know somebody or really be persistent, or both of those and some, and it's not that easy. You can have great ideas about what your art is going to be, but if you can't keep it going, then you got to do something else.
I'm curious about your activity down in Mississippi. The idea of it's a state that does not get a very good rap on a national level, but musically, what do you put are you putting yourself into any situations? Or are you involved with playing instruments?
Well, once in a while when somebody comes through, Donald McDonough came through, and he and I put on a concert at the USM College in Long Beach, and which was fun. But I mean, let's face it, Mississippi likes rock and roll and country and western, and when you start getting too far away from that, nobody's going to show up. So I don't rely on music here hardly at all, but yearly I have been going to California so I can play music and do some performance work and stuff like that, but I don't know how much longer I can even do that. It depends. So it's playing this kind of music is chancy, and it's also risky. It is the riskiest music there is, because you got no form, and you either bring it off or you don't. And if you don't, then it sounds awful. So it's sort of like that.
In the most recent show that you guys did at Petaluma, was it received by the audience well?
Very well, and it was filled to capacity, and we got a lot of very positive things. And it appears like we're going to put together some sort of a video from that performance, but I don't have anything hardly to do with that, so Lee knows more about that than I do.
Who else? I asked you this before, but it was you and Lee, and who else played? Was it a revolving door of artists, or was there a core group?
Well, Chuck Day was the fourth person I mentioned, and that was the core group for most of the time. But it was also revolving because there was lots of people that wanted to play with us that did, and when some people would give it up or not play, we get someone else. So it was a revolving door, and yet I think Lee and I were the kingpins, and Chuck Day and Tom Donnellinger were the ones that were the most interested. Musicians love to play this kind of music because it's so free, but there's some kinds of musicians that can't play it, and those are the ones that have too much training and they can't function in that non-notated world.
Yeah, I'm curious. One of my theories is that with the, for a variety of reasons, there's just a huge imbalance with in music from academia as opposed to just indigenous, whatever you want to call it, Marin County, forest learning, street learning, urban learning. Like you said, this music is hard. It's very abstract, and it can go. I just wish that there were opportunities, and maybe there are, at universities to play abstract percussive music. I just find it to be, I call this the Gravity Adjuster's expanding mind band, because in many ways it opens your consciousness. And I don't quite understand. I'm not trying to sound naive, but I tend to think that there were cats out there, guys that were playing maybe more, not as free as you, but they were out there saying, I'm playing what I want to play because I believe in it. And, if the audience isn't into it, so be it, but I'm going to be individualistic. I don't hear that individualism as much anymore. Like you said, it's hard. It's hard to get marketed. But, in general, they're not teaching this stuff in academic settings, I don't believe.
No. Well, music is a funny thing, and people have their categories, and a lot of people don't want to step outside categories. If they're a trained musician, there's an awful lot of people that do not want to improvise music because they have training, and that's where it is, and they're going to leave it like that. Others, not so. They have been trained, but they want to improvise and play free also. And those are mostly the kind of people that I run into. There are some instrument builders in the Bay Area that Lee builds a few instruments, but there's a number of others that are producing some really nice pieces that they play, and they perform around the Bay Area. Tom Nunn is one of those, and but there are others, and I'm thankful that at least it's going forward. Once people get onto this kind of music and how much fun it is to play, they don't want to play anything else. That's just what they want to play because it's
Yeah.
it's rewarding.
Were you guys? How did? Obviously, people heard through word of mouth, but I'm curious as to your relationship with musical relationship with Mickey Hart. He made it over there, and he became somewhat infatuated with the waterphone. I was hoping you could talk about your experience playing with Mickey.
Well, I played with him a couple of times. We went up to his barn one night in
Novato.
Yeah. Lee and I, and I think Tom Donnelly, I think, might have gone with us for that night. And Mickey, of course, has all his instruments in there. And we played for a while, and he bought some stuff. And then they turned around, and the Grateful Dead bought a bunch of stuff. I mean, 3 or 4 waterphones, an RSG, some water drums, and so yeah, I can't remember what all. But anyhow, they bought a big pile of stuff, and then from that, then I never heard anything else from them, either pro con or anything. So I'm not really in touch with Mickey anymore.
You know, I was going to say that it's amazing because there's a lot of people that do a lot of this sort of research, fanatical Grateful Dead fans. I mean, the Dead, like I talked about, their drum and space portions of their shows did not really come to fruition until the late 70s and became a lot more sophisticated in the early 80s. And I'm thinking to myself, it doesn't surprise me that they bought a lot of stuff off of you, because when I listen to their drums, those portions of the shows, it sounds like a lot of waterphones and a lot of stuff with water in it, and it's really quite remarkable that you were a bridge to that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, I was really on the outside because the Grateful Dead never invited me to play or lead or any of that, and which is fine. We weren't expecting that, and I was never really a Grateful Dead fan anyhow. So, but then I wasn't an Elvis Presley fan, and a lot of other people that everybody thinks is the greatest thing on earth. So it just, I don't know, it was sort of natural. He bought some stuff, and we played with him a time or two, and that was that. And I don't know much about him since then. I'm not a groupie. I don't hang out and watch what bands do or stuff like that.
No, it's not about being a groupie. It's about the fact that, everybody can. The Grateful Dead were in and of themselves, their own being. But when you look at their drummers, especially, they had 2 drummers, and Mickey was. I don't know Mickey either. But what I'm saying is that there's no doubt in my mind that if you listen to the drum segments of their shows, it sounds like the Gravity Adjusters expansion band, which to me it's a huge link, and that that cross fertilization of music and that ability to build outside the box and cross artistic mediums, that's legacy. And so it has nothing to do with whether you pal around or you're a groupie or anything like that. It just shows the reach of this music with those who that can play it and and love it very dearly. I think that's one reason I wanted to talk to you about it. But Richard, I just wanted to end by. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question: is the entire tape that we're speaking right now, is it all going onto the air?
Yes.
Okay. I could add some PSs, but I don't want to at this level. There were some problems playing music with some of those people, which I don't want to get into.
You know what? It's funny. Lee touched on it as well, and we didn't want to even go in that direction because it was going to just sort of bring down that vibe,
That's right, and that's where I'm at with it too. So
you don't have to. No, we're not here to. We're here to do the Gravity Adjusters expansion band, and that's all. But as I'm learning more about the Expanding Mind band, Bryce Rohde was playing piano, and you had bass players playing, and Chuck Day was on guitar. So it wasn't just percussion.
Lee and I weren't just playing percussion either. We were playing water fountains, and which we had to, playing them as a stringed instrument. They're not percussive sounding there. They sound more string-like. So, but with Bryce especially, I mean, he was definitely a melody man, and he would pick up little phrases and things that we get behind.
Where were some of the? Was it always in Lee's studio, or were you outside in the? Did you wind up playing at boarding houses or coffee shops or anything like that? I mean, where did you guys perform live?
We performed in San Francisco in a number of places. Fugazi Hall. I can't think of the name of all the places. Same thing for Berkeley. We played at the Berkeley Arts Center. We played in a number of churches. We played at some clubs in Santa Rosa. We played the musical Saw Festival twice in Santa Cruz. Let's see, what else? There's some musical instrument exhibits in San Francisco that we performed at, and we played at the Oakland Museum for a big instrument, new musical instrument exhibit that they sponsored, and we got called the Hands Down Hit.
So you are there any more performances being planned? I often ruminate about if I wasn't so tied into my family, being able to get up to Petaluma, and I would certainly do it if I knew that the Gravity Adjusters would be playing again. Is there any possibility before the rest of the year that you guys might be collaborating?
No time soon, but Lee is kind of cranking it up, trying to keep it open, and evolve the band a little bit and get it morphed into with another band. And I'm all for that if that's what everybody wants to do. And that was basically the band at the Cinnabar Theater was the Gravity Adjusters morphing into a third entity, and it turned out pretty good. We were surprised, especially some of the pieces developed very nicely, and it was rewarding.
And how long ago was that gig?
Let's see. I think it was on about the 23rd or 4th of March.
So it was quite recent.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah, we're still working with the material we recorded, with the video and the audio. Like I say, eventually there's going to be a video of that performance, so we'll see how that goes.
Who played that night besides you and Lee?
Oh, wait a minute. Now you're about to ask me some names, and some of those people I hadn't played with before, so I can't come up with that right here.
But okay, so my question was: were any of them from the original or from around that time of the Gravity Adjusters, or were they newer faces?
They were all new. The only one that was close to not being new was Gary Knowlton, who was my next door neighbor. I have the poster here from that. So let's see. Lee Charlton, Gary Knowlton, Keith Kudaback on piano and keyboards, Tom Solinger, violin, viola, and Rob Wright on double bass, and me.
And so Lee recruited those guys, I assume.
Well, we had rehearsed with most of them. The violin player was new, but the rest of those guys, we had some sessions at his studio in Santa Rosa, and we had played together, and we liked what we heard, so that's one reason this gig went forward.
I got to tell you, Richard, a huge amount of credit to you for your improvising, not just on the bandstand, but also making instruments that have expanded sound and lent itself to great music. It's a huge piece of our cultural heritage, and I look forward to maybe one day meeting up in the future and seeing you guys play a little bit.
Well, thanks for those compliments, and I hope that it works out. I'm sure. Just stay in touch with Lee, because he's kind of the central communication guy in terms of music there. And he would know if we were going to perform, and I doubt if that's going to happen anytime this year. But who knows about next year? And it's too early to ascertain that. But we like to get together and play music, so who knows? I
just want to tell you, we're living in a pretty callous time in our history in this country. Around the world is very intense. It's not the America you grew up in, that's for sure. I will tell you, I wouldn't call this meditative music. I certainly wouldn't call it new age music. But I think that you guys just keep the pedal to the metal, because even with this new amalgamation, improvisational music, especially stuff that is going to adjust your mind and expand your mind, is going to become very prevalent in certain pockets of this country as we move forward. So best of luck to you, my friend, and I look forward to sharing this interview on Facebook and all over the world. So thank you very much.
And thank you. I appreciate the interview, and smooth sailing to you.
All right, brother.
Bye, man.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.